Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Andrew Kirchhoff, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we're talking about my Week 3 preseason standouts. Now, before we get into today's video, I want to remind all of you, if you haven't yet clicked that subscribe button, click the button. There's going to be fantasy football content coming to you throughout the entirety of the 2019 fantasy football season. Go down to the comment section. There are many people in the community willing to answer questions, talk to each other, whether it's fantasy, trade advice, anything of that nature. So go down there, join the community. Also, if you haven't yet clicked that notification bell button, do so to get updated exactly when my latest content is out. Last thing I wanted to mention before we begin today is my Patreon. The link is down in the description for those of you who are interested. This coming season, I will not be answering YouTube comment questions. I will only be answering questions for Patreon supporters due to time constraints. So hopefully those of you who are willing to support the channel for its future and are willing to get some advice in return, that is the place to go and find everything that you're looking for. Hey everybody, how's it going? Okay, so we're talking preseason today. So after I spent majority of this morning updating the draft kit for Patreon and all that kind of jazz, I sat down, I watched some film, and I tried to find just breakout players, plain and simple. I did not want to do the format of talking for 35 minutes straight. I just want to talk about specific players that I thought had a great week. So I'm not going to go game by game like I've done in weeks past. I'm just going to talk about players that I thought were great. Starting off, number one, wide receiver for the Eagles, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, drafted this season. He's a rookie, second rounder. Drafted in the same round as Miles Sanders, a guy that's coming into the Eagles organization to eventually take the mantle of the number 2 wide receiver position. Going into this year, he probably won't have too much of an opportunity unless an injury is to occur because of the fact that Alshon Jeffrey, Deshaun Jackson coming back to the organization. You still have Nelson Aguilar. I don't know if they're going to try to move him this offseason because they're going to owe him some money soon. You still have the receiving option of Dallas Goedert and Zach Ertz. So there's a lot of mouths to feed in the passing game in this offense. So even though he had a pretty good game with Josh McCown, I don't know how Josh McCown continues to do it. He's going to be the backup for the Eagles this year. He came in through 2 touchdowns and looked good. Josh McCown did, but Arcega-Whiteside had himself a touchdown, had himself over 100 yards receiving, about 8 receptions. Looked good overall, and if in fact somebody's to go down, this guy's going to be a pretty big contributor in this offense, I think. But when we're talking about going into the future, next year potentially or the year after, this is exactly the receiver they kind of want. He kind of looks like a Alshon Jeffrey-esque kind of wide receiver, big-bodied, one-on-one kind of competition, go up 50-50 ball, and he's pretty good at that. So he did that throughout his entire college career. So hopefully it can transition to the NFL. But otherwise, he had a pretty good week. Moving on, another player that I thought was a pretty big standout, and we hadn't seen this player play since last year during the preseason, Darius Slay of the Washington Redskins finally had his preseason debut. We hadn't seen him play since last preseason where he tore his ACL. And, man, he looked good, plain and simple. He had a good amount of runs. I think they gave him 11 touches on the ground, racked up a decent amount of yards. It's just good, and it's in a way that it builds confidence for him. We don't really care if his averages are more than 4 yards per carry. We're not looking for that. For a guy that has dealt with so many complications to that ACL injury, whether it was the infection that caused him to have some setbacks or any of that nature or jazz, it's a confidence builder to go out there with your team and be able to produce and kind of feel yourself again. And sure, he might not be fully 100%, but he's eventually going to get there as the season progresses. And I think for an offense like the Redskins, Case Keenum's your starting quarterback. Who's your number 1 wide receiver? You have, what's his name? Jordan Reed with a concussion now. This team is all about methodically moving the ball, and I think they're going to do that in the running game. And Darius Slay is the guy that's going to have to do it. Now, I did notice that Chris Thompson was on the field every third down opportunity there was. So, Darius Slay at best is a 2-down back. And with Adrian Peterson still in that backfield, he's the insurance policy just in case Darius Slay begins to slow down at any point. So, fantasy implication-wise, still not great for Darius Slay. He's not the solo back in this backfield, but it is a great confidence builder going into the future, having played and looked pretty decent in my eyes. So, all in all, that's great. Another 2 players that I wanted to mention from the same team, from the Jacksonville Jaguars, D.D. Westbrook and Leonard Fournette. Now, D.D. Westbrook caught a touchdown, was targeted many times by Nick Foles. Now, like I've mentioned all of offseason, and for those of you, many of you who have gotten the draft kit, you go to the D.D. Westbrook section, I literally break down the fact that Nick Foles loves to target the slot position. That's exactly what D.D. Westbrook is. He's the slot receiver of this team. And by all means, he's going to be targeted more than anybody on this offense. He's going to be the number one wide receiver of the Jaguars in 2019, and he's going to be pretty good fantasy-wise. Now, I know many of you may be thinking he's way higher than he should be or way lower. I think as a higher-end wide receiver 3, it's not terrible. He's a pretty decent investment. We've seen him produce last year with a plethora of just terrible quarterbacks, Kessler and Bortles. Nick Foles is such an upgrade. It's not even close, to be honest. The offensive line's improving. You bring back Fournette. This offense changes so much. On top of it, another player, Leonard Fournette, like I just mentioned. Oh my goodness. It's actually insane. He literally went out for so many routes in this preseason game this past week that I honestly think they're going to just turn him into a 3-down back. Now, I hope to God, because Alfred Blue is injured, by the way. I hope to God he ends up being this 3-down back. Look, listen, even though I say things like, I don't know if he's going to be able to stay healthy, like I mentioned in my video, and I don't know if we can depend upon him. I don't know if we can trust him. I hope at the end of the season, I can eat my words. I hope. I really want guys like Leonard Fournette and Derrick Henry to have fantastic years. I'm not rooting for them to, be garbage. I don't want that. I want all fantasy prospects to have successful seasons, right? But sometimes injuries, that's something you just nobody can control. Only he can control that. And even then, sometimes your body just gives out. So either way, he looked good in the running game. This is the first time he participated in the preseason. He went out for multiple passes out of the backfield. And I think, as a receiving back, a 3-down back, potentially, Leonard Fournette's value starting to rise. All right, moving on to another couple players I wanted to mention on the same team. Marvin Jones and Danny Amendola. So when I was watching the Bills versus the Lions game, both of these guys I think are being extremely undervalued in fantasy. I think the fact of the matter is, okay, I understand that Kenny Golladay, he had a big year last year, but you didn't have Kerryon Johnson for a lot of the time. You had no Golden Tate after they traded him, and Marvin Jones went down with his ACL injury. Now, because of that, the opportunity was pinpointed and totally focused on giving Kenny Golladay the ball. Now, Kenny Golladay, even when Golden Tate and Marvin Jones were in the lineup, he was still a good wide receiver. He was still putting up wide receiver 2 numbers in the first 5 weeks of the season. I'm not taking that away from him. I'm just saying I think we're all looking past the other receiving options of this team. We know that the Detroit Lions in the past have been a receiving or a pass-heavy offense, plain and simple. They have. And I think that they're not going to be too far away from that. Yes, they've brought in like CJ Anderson. They have Kerryon Johnson. They want to run the ball, sure. But at their core, they're still a passing offense. And I think a guy like Danny Amendola filling in for Golden Tate, who was so successful in Detroit, and then Marvin Jones coming back, who had a couple red zone targets this last week, wasn't able to complete. But hey, Marvin Jones is a TD guy. He, without a doubt, is the red zone threat of this offense. I know Kenny Golladay himself has a pretty solid threat himself of getting in the red zone, but Marvin Jones in seasons past has proven double-digit touchdowns is nothing that he's not capable of. He's absolutely capable of doing so, and I think these are guys that are being undervalued. They kind of stood out to me this week, especially how they were being used in their respective offense this past week. So moving on. Kyler Murray. Okay, Kyler Murray played against the Vikings this week and moved down the field pretty easily against that defense. Majority of the defense was the number ones, and I was surprised how easily they were able to methodically move down the field. I understand David Johnson fumbled, and that should have been considered a fumble. His knee did not hit the floor before the ball came out of his hands. Either way, the NFL refs, they don't do their jobs. People in the booth, they're not doing their jobs. But they'll eventually figure it out. It happens. It's human mistakes, whatever. But obviously, Kyler Murray has looked great. This past week, even with the offensive line not looking great, Kyler Murray has the legs to be able to produce. I don't understand how so many people can be afraid of Kyler Murray's offensive line. I understand. He's a smaller statured quarterback, but he can get out and away from pressure. He's done it his entire career in college, or at least that one season, because he hasn't really played anywhere else, right? He's only got 1 year of experience there. But from what we've been able to see, at least this offseason, in the preseason, and from last season in college, he can easily get away from pressure. He's a fast quarterback. Sure, he's not going to look to run the ball as often nowadays, but he can definitely get away from pressure and extend plays and be able to make plays with his arm. Similar to what like Deshaun Watson was able to do. Deshaun Watson is a running quarterback. He's going to run the ball, right? But, the offensive line, even though that's been an issue in the past, it hasn't been too big of a deal because he's still able to produce. Yes, giving up 50 sacks last year to Deshaun Watson is an unfortunate happening. But when you have a quarterback that can make plays with their legs, it's so much easier to rely upon them to make plays. But overall, I thought he looked pretty good. On the other side of the ball, Dalvin Cook had a big run. Right now, we're all aware of that. That Dalvin Cook had a ginormous run that went for 75 yards. Everybody's got to relax. Okay, number one, the Arizona Cardinals are terrible against the run. They were last year. They're going to keep being. They're still going to be terrible against the run this year. I don't think that's changing at all. I don't think it should change. They really didn't make too many adjustments. Maybe they got a middle linebacker. They brought in T. Suggs. What is that going to do? Okay, to be honest, we don't expect the Arizona Cardinals to be a defensive heavy team. Maybe against the pass, they've got some good players in the secondary, but against the run, I'm not really worried about that. Now, it's obviously exciting to see Dalvin Cook make out a big one, but my biggest issue is the Vikings offensive line. Now, we talk about Arizona's offensive line just a couple moments ago. They were the worst offensive line in the NFL last year, but the Vikings offensive line were not too far back, and that's what scares the crap out of me. The amount of sacks that Kirk Cousins took in that preseason game this week it's unacceptable. I don't understand how an organization can go from 1 year of having probably the 27th ranked offensive line to being just as bad. They drafted a center, but what else are you going to do? Maybe go and actually pay some money. Go get Trent Brown, just like the Raiders did. Invest in your future. Your future is Kirk Cousins. You went and you signed a lot of money for him. And your future is Adam Thielen, Dalvin Cook, Stephon Diggs. That's your future. Why not protect them with a good offensive line? I don't get it. And it scares me. It scares me a tad bit, especially for Dalvin Cook's sake. I know he had a big run there, but when you're playing against a stout defense like the Chicago Bears or even the Packers made some improvements defensively, the Lions have made improvements defensively this offseason, it's gonna be tough. We'll see. Moving on. Another thing I wanted to mention. So I was watching the Saints game. Drew Brees is unbelievable. Now, obviously, I know Drew Brees is a legend. We know this. But it's just so crazy how he's the throws that he was making into tight windows. He's just not scared, and it's not even that he's not even just not scared. It's that he knows for a fact that the throws that he's making are going to end up in his receiver's hands. He was throwing the ball to Michael Thomas, and I mean Michael Thomas obviously is the number one receiver there, and then the number two wide receiver sitting over there is Alvin Kamara, right? And he had a pretty good couple catches there himself. But oh my goodness, Drew Brees, that offense is going to keep producing. I mean, honestly, they might be my favorites to get out of the NFC this coming season. They probably should be with the improvements they've made. Bringing in Jared Cook also offensively, it only helps. And then Latavius Murray being able to at least replace the production from a Mark Ingram, it just that offense is just so damn good. Moving on, 49ers. Let's talk about the 49ers now. Jimmy Garoppolo's first game of the preseason did not look good. We know that for a fact, but he came back around and he produced a far better performance here in week 3. A thing that I wanted to point out, the starting receivers for the 49ers, Marquise Goodwin, Dante Pettis, Kendrick Bourne. Those are the 3 guys that are in the rotation as of right now as the starting 3. Now, whether or not Dante Pettis can end up being the number one of that team, only time will tell. But we know Marquise Goodwin and Jimmy Garoppolo, especially the year that Jimmy Garoppolo was traded in 2017 to the 49ers, those two were a great connection, especially in the fantasy playoffs in 2017. Both of them were a great connection. It helped Marquise Goodwin's fantasy value going into last year. Obviously, he was bugged with an injury, and so was Jimmy Garoppolo, so their production disappeared. But Marquise Goodwin's a guy that we shouldn't forget about because within this offense, as a deep threat, it only takes one play for him to really take the top off the defense. We've seen him in practices where he completely torches Richard Sherman. I know Richard Sherman's not a fast corner, but still, he's got some deadly speed there. Outside of that, Kittle's obviously going to be their starting tight end. It's going to be the rotation between Tevin Coleman and Matt Breida. Matt Breida made some steps to show he can still be used in this offense. Look, here's the thing about Matt Breida. He had a beautiful catch. It's great. I mean, we expect that. He is a 3-down back. He's capable of doing it, but is his body going to be able to sustain the damage it takes typically over the NFL season? Last year, he was pulled out of 4 games, medically pulled from 4 games, all in the first half. You can't trust a guy like that, right? In fantasy, we cannot put in a guy and just hope that he stays healthy, right? If he has pre-existing injuries, a guy like Matt Breida does not want to sit out. We knew that all of last season. He said it publicly. I'm not going to sit out. Even if I'm hurt, I'm going to play for this team. That's nothing that we want to invest in too heavily. I know Tevin Coleman is going to lead this backfield, in my opinion, and then Jerick McKinnon will come and figure it out. Eventually, I think he might even start on the IR. But Matt Breida still is going to have himself a good amount of touches. Potentially 8, 9, 10 touches a game, which could be a good flex option in fantasy, depending on how this 49ers offense succeeds this season. Moving on to the other side of the ball, they played against the Kansas City Chiefs. Damian Williams had a monster catch on the sideline, similar to Matt Breida, but Matt Breida got over the top of the defense. Instead, Damian Williams was able to catch the ball and then just juke one of the guys in the secondary, find himself in the end zone. Here's my thoughts on Damian Williams. This entire offseason has been Damian Williams is a top 12 back. Damian Williams is injured. Darwin Thompson, oh my God. Carlos Hyde, oh my goodness. I might, from now on, because I mix that up so often, I might start calling Carlos Hyde Frank Gore permanently. I'm just waiting for Frank Gore to retire. By the way, Frank Gore and LaShawn McCoy, they looked damn good this last week. Speaking of them, in preseason, they were both averaging like 7 yards per carry. I was like, what the hell is going on? I'm watching these guys just completely slash the defense. I was like, God, all right. And Devin Singletary didn't get too many touches there. So for those of you who are drafting Singletary so quickly, just relax, okay? I know you want to grab a sleeper so early, but there are still a couple talented running backs. Yes, they may be old, but they're still in this backfield, and they're still playing pretty well in their careers. But anyway, Damian Williams, as I was mentioning, he went from being a top 12 running back to being an injured running back to being a guy that we were worried that Carlos Hyde would take his job. And then we were worried Darwin Thompson because of all the noise that we heard from training camp. Finally, he's healthy. Finally, he's back in the lineup. In his second preseason performance, I know he played last week, came back, looked good, scored a touchdown in this offense. If he is the starting back and he can stay healthy and that hamstring injury does not come back to haunt him, because running backs really in the past have just, Fournette, Dalvin Cook, hamstring injuries last year. As long as he can stay healthy, thumbs up. I like it. Moving up. All right. The guy on the thumbnail, I want to mention him really quickly because we're over to the Seahawks. Chris Carson, Rashad Penny. The Seahawks' number one offense this week battered the Chargers defense. They ran them clean over. Chris Carson looked good. Rashad Penny. There's a reason why he is on the thumbnail. I'm so excited about the prospect of Rashad Penny this coming season. The guy was not able to only, get some goal line work, work in between the tackles, but he was being primarily used as a receiving back. He had 3 receptions for 15 yards, which is absolutely fantastic. The whole question this offseason has been, okay, now that Mike Davis is gone, who's going to receive the ball out of this backfield? Because Mike Davis was primarily the receiving back between the 3 of Carson, Davis, and Penny last year. Mike Davis was pretty good at that. He's going over to Chicago. That's why, David Montgomery and Tariq Cohen are a little worried, because all 3 of them can do the identical things. They can all run between the tackles and they all catch the ball. Anyway, going back to the Seahawks. The question has been whether Carson or Penny is going to be the receiving back of this team, and I think it's going to be Penny. I think because of the fact that Chris Carson is obviously going to touch the ball more on the ground, he's going to have 250 rushing attempts this year. As long as he can stay healthy and play a 16-game season, they're going to have to pull away some of his opportunity in the passing game in order to keep him healthy. You can't overwork Chris Carson. Sure, you can do it, but he's going to miss time, and then Penny's going to completely take the job. So I think investing in a player or a prospect like Rashad Penny with the opportunity he's already going to have in his backfield, on top of the potential of being a high upside handcuff with passing game opportunity, with goal line opportunity potentially, it only goes up. I love Rashad Penny this year. Okay, moving on to the last couple guys that I wanted to mention. Dante Moncrief. With the number one team of the Pittsburgh Steelers, who looked pretty good the other day, Juju Smith-Schuster caught a touchdown in the back of the end zone. Why? Because they were playing the Tennessee Titans. The Tennessee Titans defense, I mentioned it all of last season. I know you guys remember. Adoree Jackson and Malcolm Butler are not good corners. They are terrible. They get burnt every time. Literally every time. That's why when T.Y. Hilton plays the Tennessee Titans this year, I don't care if Jacoby Brissett is the quarterback. You are starting T.Y. Hilton plain and simple. I'm telling you guys. That secondary, I think they gave up the 10th most points to wide receivers last year. No. I don't think. I know they did. And the fact of the matter is, Juju Smith-Schuster scoring the other day wasn't a big surprise. James Conner looked good. He was using the passing game as I hate everyone's like Jalen Samuels. Oh my God, Jalen Samuels. He's gonna be used. No, stop. James Conner is the solo back of this team. I've been saying it for months. I had him as my number 5 back in May. I'm not running away from that. I'm just saying, hey, he's going to be a fantastic running back this year. Plain and simple, guys. Plain and simple. Now, the whole point of talking about the Steelers was talking about their number 2 wide receiver. Is it going to be Dante Moncrief? Is it going to be James Washington? James Washington scored a 41-yard touchdown this last week. That's 3 weeks in a row where James Washington has put up fantastic preseason numbers. Yet, he is still the number 3 wide receiver on this team. Dante Moncrief has sustained his starting spot, and he's the number 2 wide receiver. I think eventually that's going to disappear unless Dante Moncrief can really prove that he is the number 2 wide receiver there. But he's not going to see many targets. I think the number 2 receiving option of this team might end up being James Conner or Vance McDonald. I know they came out, the offensive coordinator of the Steelers came out and said Vance McDonald is not going to see any more snaps than he did last year. Bullshit. I call BS right now. Vance McDonald's going to be a featured part of this offense, along with Juju and James Conner. Now, whoever ends up being that number 2 wide receiver as of right now, it's Moncrief, but I think eventually James Washington is coming to take that job. And that's basically it, everybody. Those are the standouts that I went over. Let me know. Oh, really quickly, a couple other guys that I wanted to mention. Tampa Bay game. None of their running backs stood out again. Peyton Barber was garbage. Ronald Jones was garbage. The offensive line for Jameis Winston was garbage. He got sacked 5 times in his couple series that he played. On the other side of the ball, Baker Mayfield was terrible. But a guy that I want to just bring to attention, guys. Andre Ellington might end up being a serviceable fantasy back in full point PPR this coming season. I personally think that if in fact neither Ronald Jones or Peyton Barber can really step up and be serviceable running backs, there's a reason why they brought in Andre Ellington. Andre Ellington is one of Bruce Arians' favorite running backs, even back to when he was a head coach of the Arizona Cardinals. When DJ went down with that injury, with the wrist injury that he broke in week 1 of the 2017 season, Andre Ellington picked up a pretty good amount of value there out of that backfield. So I think Andre Ellington's a guy that we should just keep our eyes on. Not saying to go and pick him up, just keep your eyes on it. And for those of you who are on the Patreon, a couple days back, literally on the day of Lamar Miller getting injured, I went and I made a post and I put Lamar Miller is hurt. I'm calling it right now, Jay Ajayi to the Texans. There's rumors. If I end up calling it, then I'm going to screenshot it and I'm sending it to Twitter. But anyway, thank you everybody for watching. There typically or probably won't be a week 4 preseason standouts because this following week, there's not going to be any starters playing. Majority of the play is going to be from second and third string guys that are trying to make the roster or at least show up and at least produce somewhat. But overall, I don't think, no guarantee that there's going to be an episode next week. But anyway, thank you everybody for watching. If you like this content, go down below, click the like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and go down the comment section. Let me know, is there any other guys that you saw this past week that were standouts that I missed? Let me know what you guys think. Thank you everybody for watching. Much appreciated on all the support and the comments below. Thank you everybody, and until next time, which will be tomorrow, we're going to do some Hard Knocks, maybe another episode, maybe some defense. Thank you everybody, and I'll see you guys. Peace.